Growing up in upstate New York, winter was a given. Snow, ice, all the fun of a snow day. I'm all twisted up here. There we go. All the fun of a snow day, skiing, ice skating on the pond at my house, all the winter things. Fast forward to our first year in upstate New York as a family. And it was one of the snowiest years on record. This is the house we actually lived in. We had snow on the ground from what seemed like November to April that year, and it seemed that it never melted away. But sometime deep in winter, Phil and I began to notice that the snow was disappearing. It was not above freezing, but the snow levels were for sure diminishing. So I did what one does, and I consulted Facebook. And thanks to some of my very smart friends, I was reminded of sublimation, the process of a solid going directly to gas, skipping over the liquid state. So skipping over the melting, the snow would go straight into the atmosphere. Now, certainly somewhere along the way, I had learned this in science class, but had long since forgotten that this is a thing. And while I conceptually understand that this can happen, it's still somewhat of a mystery to me. This is kind of how I approach the Transfiguration story. Conceptually, I hear what was read, but it's still somewhat of a mystery. I don't really understand what happened. I don't understand how it happened. And I just imagine Peter, James, and John feeling similarly baffled as they sat there and watched this scene before them. There's Jesus, that guy that they have dinner with and that they walk from town to town with, but something odd is happening. His face is shining like the sun. His clothes are dazzling white. We got to presume they weren't white to begin with. And the same for the story for Moses and the folks gathered then. The presence of God is described as a blazing fire atop the mountain that Moses walks into. Something is up. Something is happening beyond our basic understanding of how things ordinarily work. It's a big, giant mystery, and I would guess it's a big, giant mystery even if you're watching it with your own eyes, let alone hearing about it second or third or fourth hand. This week, I was driving in the car and listening to NPR, as I often do, and on Tuesday, February the 14th, I heard these words spoken by Mary Louise Kelly on All Things Considered. Listen.
One of my colleagues on this program has some advice he gives when you're heading out into the world to report. Notice what you notice, he says. The thing that jumps out at you, that is worth putting in your story. Well, I heard those words spinning in my head as I reported in Tehran these last few days.
Notice what you notice. Now, she went on to talk about her experience in Tehran, but those words struck me as important words. Notice what you notice. So I wonder what you noticed in the scriptures today. What did you notice? Go ahead. What did you notice? Tell me.
At the end, he said, don't tell anybody.
At the end, he said, don't tell anyone. Jesus was like, shh, mum's the word on this story. Because something weird happened, so don't tell anybody. Right? What else did you notice? They obviously told somebody. Right? Because we're hearing about it. What else did you notice?
They're unquestioning acceptance of these astounding things.
Yeah, so they didn't really question what they were seeing of these astounding things that were happening. They just sort of were witness to it. What else? What? they knew who Elijah and Moses were with Jesus. Now, I'm guessing they did not have photos of them from, a few centuries beforehand. They didn't probably have paintings, but they somehow knew who they were. Yeah. Peter wanted to make shrines, little houses, little huts for them all, because this is pretty cool. We should just stay right here. Make sure they've got shelter. Yeah. What else? The 40 days, yeah. So there's a reference to 40 days that, if you remember, is biblical code for a really long time, okay? And that connects us with our 40 days of Lent that happens. So Lent is the season that's 40 days plus Sundays, but we'll talk about that another day. Yeah. What else? The clouds. So there's clouds in both stories, right? And clouds are representing the holy, God's presence coming in both stories. What else?
He said, until I'm prepared, or words to that effect.
Until I'm prepared.
Don't tell anybody until I'm prepared.
Right. Don't tell anybody until I'm prepared. Jesus said that, or Moses?
Jesus.
Yeah, Jesus is saying that, yeah. So there's something to come. Yeah. Did you notice there were 6 days mentioned in both stories? 6 days at the beginning of the Exodus story, 6 days at the beginning of Jesus' story. They are somewhat mirror images of each other, yeah. And I wondered about the connection, if you would have made the connection thinking about that to the 6 days of creation. And so you hear these numbers that take you on a journey to connect you. Did you notice the words, listen to him? Where else do we hear those words? Baptism story, yes. So those same words are spoken through the cloud to Jesus. Listen to him. We talked about the cloud cover and the shining, that element of fire in Moses' story and in Jesus' story. There's something that happens that when the presence of God is near, something changes, right? All of this is that idea of noticing. None of these notices tell us exactly what happened in the science behind it or anything like that, but it gets us closer to the heart of this story when we notice, when we pay attention. And that is how we encounter God. We have to notice. Now, sometimes it's a big transfiguration, shining, you can't miss it kind of a thing. But usually, it's a whole lot more subtle. So that if you are not paying attention, you are actually going to miss it. If you're not noticing, you're going to miss it. Kind of like that snow back that first year, we had to pay attention in order to notice that the snow was changing. Because at first glance, it's just snowy, and it's been snowy for months on end, and it's been cold for months on end. But when you notice, when you're paying attention, you can see more. So set about noticing. Notice what's around you. Notice who's around you. Notice who's not around you. Notice what you're hearing and doing and encountering. As we head into Lent, notice. Notice what you notice. Because God is there in the midst of our noticing. Thanks be to God. Amen.